Hello, I'm Steph from My Driver Classic, and today we are down at the Goodwood Breakfast Club. Now we've got here a little bit late because you may not know this, but we have had such a busy week. We've had to fit the engine, start running the engine in. It took me 6 hours to get from Huddersfield to Coventry, and then to get from Coventry to Goodwood has taken another 4 hours. So essentially it's taken me 10 hours across the tiny roads of Great Britain to be here today at the Goodwood Breakfast Club, and I don't regret a minute spent on the road because I am so excited to be here. Not to give all the spoilers away, but you are going to see some brilliant cars today. We're going to see action shots, we're going to see rarities that I pretty much can guarantee that you've never seen before, and all on the backdrop of Goodwood's delicious heritage site. It's a really good bit of fun, but first of all, let's go and grab some breakfast. We parked up and immediately all my senses came to life because I was surrounded by old cars. So it's the first thing that wakes me up after driving for 1,000,001 hours. And my goodness, the selection was just absolutely superb. A little bit like the breakfast that got extra points for serving a slice of fried bread, which is a bit of a guilty pleasure. Now, coming back to the rooftop where we were sitting, this is why I think you should book your breakfast, because this gives you such an epic view just to enjoy your breakfast and to see everything that's going on. Now let's go back to the cars and have a look at what's on the ground. One of the biggest bits of advice that I always give to people that say to me, what advice do you give? It's one of those generic questions that I get. I always say, go further. Go and see car shows that you have never been to before. And the reason I do this is because the vast majority of classic car owners really don't travel that far, whether it's a reticence to push the vehicle a little bit further, whether it's people that get a little bit older and say, well, I'm not going to travel 1,000,001 miles. And what happens is you tend to find pockets of interest. And it means that if you travel further, you get to go and see stuff that you've probably never seen before. And I find this every single time I go to Goodwood. I see cars that I've just never seen before, including makes, models, particular examples, and I find that really exhilarating because it adds a new flair around classic car ownership to me. And if you're wondering, by the way, what the average classic car owner does a year, there was a study done by the FBHVC in, I think it was 2019, that says that the average British classic car owner travels less than 2,500 miles a year in their classic, which means that if you're going further, you're just going to see stuff that you probability wise are not going to see anywhere else. Now you are going to notice throughout this video that there is no particular order, and for me that is a really big plus point, because whilst it is good fun going to car shows and seeing rows of the same cars and you get to pick out the differences and mull over the things that people have done to bring them into the 21st century, it can get a little bit samey. Whereas when you come somewhere like this to Goodwood Breakfast Club, you end up being utterly spoilt because everything is mixed in, which really does give you the impetus to get round as quickly as you can. And it's always a tip that I give if you're going to Goodwood Revival: wear a sensible, comfortable pair of shoes. And I'm also going to give it for the Goodwood Breakfast Club because you have plenty of steps to be pounding down the runway, round all the various garages, everywhere you need to be. There is a different car worth seeing. And quite sadly, because we didn't manage to get here as early as I would have liked, but look, it took us 4 hours. It meant that I didn't get to see absolutely every single car. However, what I decided to do was to make peace with it. And I thought, it's okay, I can always come back. It's always worth the drive. There's always something excellent to see. And it's better to spend quality time looking at the few cars that you can get round and see, rather than trying to pound around everything. Just give everything a quick glance and get it over and done with. There were only ever 50,000 of these mini mokes ever made, and for those of you that have got a keen eye, you'll notice the seats have changed. And if you're wondering why, it's probably because the original seats are absolute bottom wreckers. If you sit in them for more than about 15-20 minutes, your bum goes numb and it is an absolute nightmare. So I don't blame them for changing the seats, especially driving down something like this. Now let's have a look at everything else on display. Now as we walk around, you're going to see stuff that, just like this Peugeot actually, where you're probably going to say, I have no idea when I last saw one of those. And this is what this Breakfast Club meet for me has been a real source of joy for is I go to car shows all the time, and there are some vehicles that I see all the time. Doesn't mean that I appreciate them any less. Things like Morris Minors, Minis, MGBs, and all kudos to people for keeping those cars on the road, because it is sometimes quite difficult to find the joy to endlessly repair older vehicles again and again. However, for me, the big joy here has been seeing the stuff that you just never see anywhere else. Because not only is it a labour of love to keep something like this on the road and try and find parts for it, it's also such a rarity that it makes it quite exciting when you see it out at these shows. Now, I think you'll notice as well as we walk round that there's quite a diverse age range. And this is something that I found particularly heartwarming about this show, is that the Goodwood Breakfast Club welcomed families, and it meant that children were getting excited about classics. And that is such a passion point for me, is that I'm very worried about us fostering that love for the cars that we love in the generations that are younger than us, and we've got to keep that interest alive. And something that I noticed as I walked around is there were a lot of generous owners that probably would have really liked to look round, but they saw a child or a young person that was interested in their car, and instead of just walking away and locking the door, they were all saying, do you want to have a look? Do you want to sit in? The man with the mini moke was awash with attention, and he had so many young people, children asking questions, and he was so generous with his time, as were many owners. And for me, that is such a big thing, that so many people here at this show today were so willing to help build that excitement. And this is the thing, the more that we do, and I was talking recently at a car show about this, the more that we let people sit in our cars, look in, we share the stories, we share the heritage, we help build that excitement for the next generation. Because outside of these car shows, there are very few opportunities for people to connect with these vehicles in a meaningful way. So if you're watching this and you've got a classic and you get that opportunity to let somebody sit in the driver's seat or have a look inside your car, please do, because it's people like you and I that do that, that help drive the love forward for these cars and for the next generation of custodians. I talk about this in the roundup later on, but I really want to make it clear now as we walk around this show, is that as you walk around today with me, you'll notice that there are a lot of cars that don't tick that box of, oh, it's definitely a classic. You know, when we talk about cars that have all these chrome bumpers and things like your Morris Minors, your MGBs, things that are an acceptable classic, you'll notice that there's a lot of cars here, which in my opinion is a brilliant thing because it really opens up the stage. We've got cars here which are modified, the newer classics. That Mini Metro really caught my attention earlier because it was so clean. And you'll notice as well that there's not a real drive for everything to be 100% original, which again opens up the stage further to give us the opportunity to see cars which are decidedly different. And you'll also notice that the span of age groups is very, very wide. So you've got cars here that are from the 1910s all the way through to the 1980s, which gives you a really good mix. And it also means for people that you're coming with, so whether you're coming with your family or you're coming with a friend, there's definitely something here for you. Because quite often when I go to car shows, there'll be certain groups of friends that will say, oh, I'll definitely sign up for that car show, but I'm not going to sign up for that one because everything's too old or too new. So some of my friends felt that Festival of the Unexceptional was far too new for them, whereas they'll get more excited about the pre-war or, you know, that mid-century classic show that I've got in my diary. Whereas this is such a wide mix of different things in such a thoughtful way as well, especially in how it's laid out, the selection of cars, that I hate to use the phrase because it feels very worn out by various marketeers, but there really is something for everybody. And as you can imagine, this Plymouth Fury just really grabbed me. I do like some of this American stuff, and I love it in a way that I come to a show and I admire it, almost like when you go to a zoo and admire an exotic animal and think, wow, that is just perfect, that's beautiful. But you think, oh, I couldn't have that at home, I just couldn't manage it, it'd be far too much for me. And that's how I always feel about this American stuff. For me, it's a work of art, it's beautiful, it's exceptional. The finish on it is just something else. But when I look at it and I think, could I manage to maintain it myself? Absolutely not. It's far outside what I could manage to do. Now that moves me swiftly on to one of my favourite cars of the show, which is this 1914 Stanley. Now you might be wondering, what's going on with it? Well, it's actually a steam powered car, and I really love stuff like this because it's not stuff that you see every day. And in fact, I think this is probably only my third or fourth steam powered car, and I thought you might be on the same boat as me. So what I actually did was I went back at the end of the show and I filmed them starting it up and driving away. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go quiet and let you have a listen to how it starts up and how it drives away.
You negotiate that with your parents. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In the crew. Yeah. Ready to go. Can we stand over with me then?
You are going to have to tell me what you think of that steam car in the comments section below, because I was so excited when I saw it and I thought everyone at home is going to love this. It's so different and unique. And I know a lot of you, from chatting to you at car shows and seeing you out and about, that you love your steam trains. And I thought all those people that love steam trains and classic cars are going to lose it when they see a steam classic car. But anyway, coming back to the selection that we are looking at as we walk round, as I said earlier, we did arrive a little bit late because, of course, it did take so many hours to drive down. And I should probably say a big thank you to my best friend Joe, because he did the drive down for me, because I was absolutely strung out after doing the 6 hours from Huddersfield to Coventry. And he said, Steph, I'll do this bit. And I was very grateful indeed, because running in an engine is no walk in the park. And we're going to be doing a video on the engine fitting and running in an engine as well, because it does take a lot of work. You have to do 1,000 miles on your back roads, you have to vary your speeds, you have to follow the instructions almost to the letter, and it does take some time. So with that, we did arrive late, and this meant that we did miss out on bits, as I talked about earlier, and I'm so gutted that we did, and we're going to have to make it back again next year. But if you are watching this and thinking, I'm going to get this in my diary, my biggest tip for you is number one, bring your favourite classic, and number two is get here as early as you can, even if that means booking a hotel and coming down from wherever, or coming up from wherever you are in the country, and being here for the start of this, because It's worth the early morning. It's worth booking in a hotel because the selection here is just like nowhere else, really. I guess the only thing that I could almost put it on a par with is like when you go to the NEC and you seem to have pretty much everything under one roof, except, of course, this is a much cheaper day out and the weather is much better and it is outside. And I don't know about you, but I prefer an outdoor show. Okay, so have you ever seen one of these before? Because I hadn't, and therefore I decided to hone in on it and give you a really good dose of it. Now, this is a Skoda Octavia, and this model was in production from 1959 to the end of 1960, with this particular example built in September 1960. The early Octavia was then replaced by a slightly updated model in January 61, and so it doesn't have that decorative propeller on the front of the radiator grille, and then it has small fins at the rear. Now, this early Octavia is even rarer in the country it came from because they only made up about 20% of the total production run. So there were, I believe, just over 300,000 saloon Octavias built until 1964, and then another 54,000 Octavia combis, which was like an estate version, which were then built between 1961 and 1971. Now, the owner of this particular vehicle was telling me, and we talk about those early memories, that he bought this because his parents had an early Octavia as their first car in spring 1960 when he was aged only 3 years old, and he absolutely adored the car. So then, when the opportunity arose, he then bought this Octavia. So he was telling me that he went all the way back to, I think it was Prague, in summer 2014, and so they did some mechanical work. They had the engine professionally decoked, and still the radiator was repaired, and various other things that were produced. Now, I've been told that in the Czech Republic there are lots and lots of parts that can still be bought for these, so therefore it made things an awful lot easier. And so what the owner now does with it, and I'm going to give him a shameless plug because I thought it was a rather brilliant thing indeed, is he now uses it for charitable endeavours. I've put a link to the Just Giving page in the description box below, but we hope to come back and revisit this and do a proper review at some point. We're now coming to the end of our day at the Goodwood Breakfast meet, and I have enjoyed it so much. Do you know what else I've really enjoyed? Showing you all at home, because bringing you out to shows with me through the camera lens is something that I really enjoy doing, and I've done a lot this year because I think that we all need to be going out to more shows, appreciating them and using them, because there are so many shows that have been lost since COVID, and the more that we can attend and the more that we show up and the more that we take our cars out to, the better supported our hobby is, the more people get to see it, and the more visible and validated everything we do really is. Now, that's it from me today. I'm going to do a final sign off pretty much where I began. So I started with the Morris Minor and I thought, well, I'm going to end with one too. Well, what a fantastic day at the Goodwood Breakfast Club. We have had such an incredible morning, and I've learned so much as well because I've been chatting to people, seeing cars that I've never seen. I think my two standout favourites, as you probably guessed, were the Skoda and the 1914 steam car. Those two just blew it out of the water for me, and it was so worth coming down. Now, I know that there's sometimes misconceptions that when you come to somewhere like Goodwood, that a breakfast club might be only for you if your car's worth a lot of money, or it's super rare or really interesting. But here's the thing, there were cars that I would say that were really everyday and slightly more modernish classics through to the really high-end stuff, and everyone was so enthusiastic and appreciative of everyone who came along. So if you're watching this and thinking about booking on the next one, make sure you do it because you will enjoy it so much. We have had a really great time. So all the details are in the description box below, but until next time when we meet again, take care and drive safely.